You know, we hear the term inclusive school all the time, but what does it actually mean to create one? It's so much more than just putting every student in the same classroom. So today, we're going to break down the core concepts into a guide that's clear, simple, and easy to remember. So let's just dive right in with a big question: impairment, disability, and handicap. We tend to use these words as if they mean the same thing, but they are fundamentally different. And getting this distinction right, well, it's not just about semantics. It's the key that unlocks the entire philosophy of inclusive education. All right, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start by defining those key terms. Then we'll take a look at the history of education, really define what true inclusion is, talk about the barriers holding it back, and wrap up with the solutions that are actually making it work. Okay, first up, let's get our terms straight. And believe me, this is way more than just a vocabulary lesson. Getting the language right is the crucial first step, because these words literally shape how we think about the entire challenge. First, we have impairment. The easiest way to think about this is that it's the biological starting point. It's a disturbance at the organ level, so an issue with an eye or a part of the brain. It's the actual loss or abnormality of a function itself. So, from that impairment, we get to our next term, disability. A disability is the functional limitation that results from the impairment. See how we've shifted? We've gone from the organ to the individual. So if the impairment is the condition, the disability is the specific activity that the person has trouble doing because of it. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, handicap. This is where society and the environment come into play. A handicap is the disadvantage that happens because of the disability. It's a barrier created by the world around the person. And this is the most critical distinction to remember. The handicap is not in the person, it's in the environment. Okay, now this example with dyslexia is where it all just clicks. If you're studying this, this is the part you want to remember. Let's break it down. The impairment is the brain's difficulty decoding words. The disability, the functional result, is the difficulty reading fluently. But the handicap, that's the challenge of trying to complete reading assignments in a school that offers no alternatives. Now think about this. If that school provides audiobooks, the handicap is reduced, or maybe even eliminated entirely, even though the disability and the impairment are still there. It's a powerful idea. So, now that we've got those key terms down, let's zoom out. Let's look at the bigger picture, the evolution of education. It's a pretty incredible story of progress, and it shows a massive shift in how we think about teaching students with disabilities. The whole story really boils down to a shift between these two big ideas. On one side, you had the traditional model of special education, which for a long time was a completely separate system. And on the other, you have integrated and eventually inclusive education, which are all about bringing students with and without disabilities into the very same classroom. And you can see that whole journey right here on this timeline. I mean, we started with just complete exclusion. Then we moved to segregation in separate schools. Then in the 70s and 80s, we get integration and mainstreaming. These were big steps, right? But they basically put students into the existing system and expected them to adapt. It wasn't until the 90s and beyond that the truly revolutionary idea of inclusion, where the system adapts to the student, really began to take hold. And that leads us to the most important question of all. What is true inclusion then? Because as we've just seen, it's about so much more than just putting everyone in the same room. It is a completely different way of thinking. UNICEF gives us a fantastic definition here. The key phrases I want you to notice are meaningful learning opportunities and individually tailored support. This isn't about trying to make a student fit into a pre-made box. It's about redesigning the box so that everyone can fit comfortably. This table just lays out the difference perfectly. Exclusion says you can't come in. Segregation says, okay, you can come in, but you have to stay over there in that separate room. Integration says, you can join our class, but good luck keeping up. But inclusion, man, that's the total game changer. It says the entire system is going to transform to meet the needs of all learners. So why should we care so much about this? Because an inclusive approach lifts everyone up. Seriously, think about it. When a teacher creates visual aids for one student with a learning disability, that also helps all the other visual learners in the classroom. When a school builds a ramp for a student in a wheelchair, it also helps a parent pushing a stroller. Inclusion forces us to be innovative in ways that benefit absolutely everyone. But of course, a vision this big, it's not easy to pull off. So let's get real for a minute about the barriers to inclusion. What are the things that actually stand in the way of making this a reality? The challenges are pretty significant.
Some are physical, like old buildings without ramps or elevators. Some are about the curriculum itself. A rigid, one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. And maybe the biggest hurdles are attitudinal. Negative perceptions, a lack of awareness, or teachers who just don't have the training and support they need. Any one of these can stop inclusion in its tracks.
But it is so important that we don't just get stuck on the problems. Let's flip this around and talk about the solutions. Because for every one of those barriers we just mentioned, there is a powerful strategy to promote inclusion. And here's the good news. We know what works. Real success comes down to a few critical things. Deep collaboration between all the teachers, bringing support services into the classroom instead of pulling kids out, making parents true partners in their child's education, and, this one's huge, making sure the funding follows the student so the resources are always where they need to be. So what does that collaboration actually look like in a real classroom? Well, this slide shows some really effective models. You might have co-teaching, where two teachers are up there leading the class together, or parallel teaching, where they split the class into smaller groups for more focused attention. There's also the consultation model, where a specialist acts like a coach for the main teacher, and the teaming model, where a whole group of educators shares responsibility for every single student. These aren't just ideas, they're real actionable strategies that make inclusion work. So when you put it all together, you see that true inclusion isn't just a place, it's a philosophy. It's a commitment to redesigning the entire system so that every single learner belongs and can thrive. Which leaves us with one final and really important question. What is the one concrete step your school or your community can take, starting right now, to make this incredible vision a reality?